guys, it did the worst thing it could do in the conclusion of our live book read for Loose Ends. It booted me. Instagram booted me, and I think we have to reread 26, 27, and now 28. Hi, guys. I'm so disappointed Instagram booted me, because now we're going to have to reread the last few chapters. But hey, that's okay, because they're really exciting chapters. It's just we're going to have to reread them and probably save... I don't know. I think we're just going to have to go back to saving each chapter or every 2 chapters after we read them on Instagram Live, because it just likes to boot me. I don't know. I think it might have either been Instagram or my phone charger, because I'm charging my phone on this charging stand, and I think my phone got overheated, and then maybe that's what happened. If your phone overheats, does it just automatically boot you out of apps? Or is it an Instagram issue? You guys let me know what you think. I don't know. But I'm like officially annoyed. So, we were all on the edge of our seat with that last chapter. And we're going to have to reread. And we might have to just save after every chapter. And you guys will just have to bear with us as we do like 4 lives tonight. I don't know. Anyway... By the way, congratulate my friend Jess for getting Jason commenting on her post. He doesn't comment on my posts, but he comments on her posts. But that's okay, because she's a bigger Jason fan than I am. Not that I'm not a big Jason fan, I am. It's just, it means more to her, I guess, than it does to me. Does that make sense? So, yes. Oh, okay. Jody Lynn says, yes, my phone does that when it overheats. Okay, so because my phone overheated, hang on a second. Because my phone was overheating, it's at 44% now, so it's probably fine for a live or 2. But it was on this phone charger, and it overheated my phone, and that's why it's booting me. But I don't think, when it booted me before in the past, I don't think it was because of that problem. I think it was an Instagram issue. So I don't think I can blame it on just the phone charger this time. I mean, for this time I can, but for other times, I don't think I can blame it on just the phone charger. So, which really sucks. So hello to everyone who's rejoined. Yeah. But, yeah. So Michelle, get back in here, and we're just gonna have to reread or something. I don't know. I feel bad, because now it's like we got to start all over again, and yeah, Michelle, I don't know. I guess it was my phone overheating. Hi.
Hi.
Round 2.
Round 2.
Should we just start back over, I guess, even though we were in the middle of a chapter?
Did any of it save?
Oh, I don't think so. Let me check my page on my laptop, but I seriously doubt it. Because every time it's booted me off the app, it does not save. Because obviously, it's not going to give me that option when it just boots me out of the app. It's not like Instagram does you any favors and saves your lives that you were like in the middle of. So no, I don't think it saved it. So do we want to do something where we save after every chapter or 2, because it's going back to doing that?
Yeah, I mean, we can, if you want to do 26, I'll do 27, then we save.
Yeah.
And then we do 28, and then you do 28, then I'll do the epilogue, and then we'll save.
Yeah, and then we'll do a separate book live for when Jess gets on here.
For Jess to come in and do the recap.
So
sounds good.
Sorry, guys. But anyway, you did raise $10 for Habitat for Humanity during all of that.
That's true. Thank you.
So thank you for that. But yeah, Michelle, I'm gonna let you do the chapter this time.
Oh, but you've already practiced it, and I already practiced 27.
Okay, fine. Okay, we'll do it that way. I was gonna pout. Okay. All right.
No pouting. We've got this.
No pouting. You know what? Let's do it for Jason. Jason, this is for you, man.
Let's do it for Jason. Actively posting Jason.
All right. Let's do it for Jason since he's very nice to our friend Jess. Okay. Here we go. Chapter 26. I'm coming for you, space girl. You can't get away from me. Give me back that case or I'll dissect you myself. Morton's threats reverberated through the twisting labyrinth of underground chambers, the echoes making it impossible to guess just how near or far away he was. Hiding in a chapel-like grotto carved out eons ago by seeping water and sulfurous gases, Liz kept her eye out for the telltale gleam of Morton's flashlight, which she assumed he had appropriated from Lieutenant Ramirez, who had no doubt joined the gunmen's ever-growing list of victims. Periodically, over however long she had been fleeing through the convulsive caverns, she had glimpsed the leading edge of the beam, falling upon a glistening limestone wall nearby, spurring her onward through more branching tributaries and tunnels. The incandescent handprint upon her belly, which seemed to glow all the brighter the more frightened she became, was an extremely mixed blessing. On the one hand, it helped her navigate, albeit randomly, through this lightless subterranean realm, helping her avoid stumbling onto solid walls or yawning chasms. On the other hand, it made her visible to a relentless pursuer by advertising her location like a neon sign on a moonless night. For the moment, however, she seemed to have gained a slight lead on Morton, who must have taken a wrong turn somewhere amid the diverging corridors. Okay, I'm paranoid. I'm taking my phone off the charging case because I'm super paranoid.
Is it doing stuff? You're not blurry or anything for me.
I felt like it kind of shifted its brightness for a second, and so now I'm just super paranoid. So I'm taking it off the case. It should be fine. Yeah. Okay. For the moment, however, she seemed to have gained a slight lead on Morton, who might have taken a wrong turn somewhere amid the diverging corridors. Liz took advantage of this lull in the chase to do something about the sticky tape binding her wrists together. Locating a sturdy stalagmite with a notably jagged tip, she backed against the stony fang, using it as a saw to gnaw away the overlapping strips of duct tape. Doing so meant dropping the purloined tattoo case, but Liz decided she needed her hands free, even more than she wanted to hang on to the coveted spacecraft debris. I know you're in here, Tess, Morton called out, still laboring under the false impression that this was her name. Liz wasn't sure how she felt about facing death with that particular name on her would-be killer's lips. Do I want to spend my final moments on Earth mistaken for a trampy blonde homewrecker from another planet? The duct tape. Yes. Should I just say it again, just in case you guys didn't hear it? This is one of the greatest lines in the book, so I'm going to reread just for fun. Do I want to spend my final moments on Earth mistaken for a trampy blonde homewrecker from another planet? The duct tape was maddeningly durable and hard to cut through, but she eventually succeeded in poking a hole in the tape between her wrists. Then use that tiny gash as a starting point for tearing away at the gluey fibers holding the tape together. It was taking way too long, though, and Morton sounded like he was getting closer. Don't be stupid, his booming voice railed at her. It won't do you any good to get hopelessly lost down here. You're just going to starve to death in the dark. He had a point, Liz realized, but the alternative, putting herself back in Morton's blood-stained hands, was even less appealing. She'd cope with finding her way out if and when she finally got away from the murderous gunman. Tom and Becky ultimately made it out of the caves, she recalled, clinging to that storybook happy ending for comfort. So can I. Only a few gooey strands held together the tape confining her arms. She tugged her wrist apart with every ounce of strength she could muster while simultaneously sawing away at the last fraying filaments. All at once, her wrists sprang apart, and Liz discovered she could see her own hands for the first time in hours. At last, she thought gratefully, savoring this one small victory over Morton's brutality. Eager fingers peeled away the rest of the tape, revealing wrists that were red and chafed, yet blissfully free. Moving quickly to get farther away from Morton, she rescued the briefcase from the floor and headed away from the sound of his approaching voice. Feeling like some exotic bioluminescent life form evolved to exist far below the Earth's surface or at the bottom of the sea, she turned her silver light upon the silver upon the escape route ahead of her. Two separate pathways, one wide, one narrow, diverged before her. Liz hesitated, uncertain which natural aperture to take. Morton might have trouble squeezing his bulk through the skinny crevice, but what if that aisle kept on thinning until it ceased to exist? She shuddered at the thought of getting wedged into a dead end, unable to turn around and go back the way she came without running straight into Morton. All the killer would have to do is wait right where she was standing now for thirst or starvation to drive her back into his clutches. Okay, she decided, the wide door it is. There you are. Before she could even act on her choice, Morton suddenly rounded a curve, less than 20 yards behind her, his flashlight beam sweeping across both Liz and the jump chair ahead. Liz looked back in surprise, squinting into the glare of the flash, and spotted Morton's intimidating bulk charging towards her, only seconds away. Give me that case, he yelled. Give it back, you alien freak. Changing her plan at the last minute, Liz raced for the narrow opening. Swinging behind her at the end of her arm, the briefcase caught in the doorway, holding her back, and she had to stop and turn the case sideways before making it completely through the gate. The delay cost her precious seconds, so that Morgan was almost upon her by the time she got the briefcase loose. His body slammed into the limestone walls of the skinny archway, but just as Liz had prayed, he was too large to pass through the gap in his entirety. An arm and one shoulder squeezed into the shallow corridor, groping wildly for the escaping teenager. Come back here! Come back or I'll shoot! He drew back from the slender opening, aiming both his flashlight and his gun at the murky passage into which Liz had fled. Hearing his threats and knowing from experience that Morton had no qualms about gunning down those who crossed him, Liz quickened her pace, looking frantically for a turn in the corridor. Straight lines were her enemy now. Only a more crooked path would keep her out of Morton's line of fire. No, not again, she thought, unable to hold back painful recollections of the first and only time a bullet tore through her body. The jarring impact, the searing agony, rose like restless phantoms from the memories lodged in her flesh and bones. The handprint upon her stomach, where the mortal wound should have been, flared all the brighter for her terror. Please, no, not again. Am I reading too fast? Okay. Sometimes I talk too fast, so if I'm reading too fast, I could slow it down. Okay. At the last minute, the confining wall fell away to her left, and Liz ducked into the much-needed detour. Only an instant before the blast of a gunshot disturbed... here we go. Of a gunshot disturbed the sepulchral quiet of the caverns. Whatever. Disturbed the quiet of the caverns. We don't really need that word. Yeah. It's just in there for fun. Okay? For people who want to torture themselves with this word. All right. Jagged strips and flakes exploded from the end of the improvised shooting gallery she had just abandoned, followed by the dancing beam of Morton's flashlight as he feverishly sought to see if Liz had been hit or not. A volcanic curse erupted from the enraged killer when he discovered that no humanoid body, alive or otherwise, lay in the path of the searching beam. Liz had to wonder just how Morton had expected to retrieve his precious attaché case from the far end of the skinny corridor, in the event that his angry shot had killed her instantly. Then she realized that the bad-tempered gunman was beyond reason at this point. As his behavior at the crashdown had proven years ago, he was more than capable of shooting first and dealing with the consequences later. Where the hell are you? He roared in frustration. His hate-crazed voice echoed through the winding catacombs. Don't think you're getting away from me for good, space girl. I'm not leaving this godforsaken hole until I've got that briefcase and your alien hide. The side tunnel she had so luckily discovered was no wider than the narrow passage she had just escaped, and it continued to constrict inch by inch until Liz had to turn sideways just to squeeze her way forward. Increasingly afraid that she had trapped herself with no way out, except past Morton, she was forced to slide with excruciating slowness between the unyielding cavern walls, which she recalled from her science courses consisted mostly of the petrified remains of prehistoric mollusks and coral. Would her lifeless bones, she wondered, also become part of this vast prehistoric mortuary, buried for eons away from the light of day? She felt horribly sorry for her parents, who might never find out what had befallen her. Would Max or Maria explain to them about Morton and his deadly schemes, or would that risk exposing Max's and the others' alien roots? She hoped that somehow her mom and dad could receive some sort of comfort or closure. Surely Max would make sure of that in her memory. Max. She couldn't believe she might never see him again. There was so much that she still wanted to share with him, so much of their future yet to be written. At least Romeo and Juliet died together, she thought mournfully, not separated by hundreds of feet of solid rock. It occurred to her that, in a sense, she had been living on borrowed time ever since that fateful shooting at the Crashdown. Perhaps death, once again, in the form of Joe Morton and his ready pistol, had finally caught up with her. Claustrophobia added to her other fears plaguing her mind, but just when she was half convinced that the dwindling corridor was destined to become her eternal tomb, the aisle opened up, and expelling an enormous sigh of relief, she stepped into what appeared to be a spacious underground grotto, perhaps the size of a high school classroom. Gnarled stalagmites sprouted from the stony floor, while towering columns reared up toward a ceiling whose full altitude and dimensions were hidden by the all-encompassing blackness shrouding the roomy vault. We are on page 256 now, Jess just asked. Top of 256. Liz listened anxiously for the sound of Morton's heavy footsteps, not at all certain how many separate routes or entrances must lead to this particular grotto. She didn't hear anyone approaching, but someone else caught her ear, an unusual rustling coming from high above her, accompanied by occasional high-pitched squeaking and chattering. Bats, she realized with a shiver. The grotto sounded as though it was home to a great many bats, all roosting overhead. The air smelled like a zoo, she swiftly noted, while the floor of the chamber was slick with accumulated bat guano, causing Liz to wrinkle her nose in disgust. That's bat poop, y'all. Bat poop. Glancing at the lighted face of her watch, she saw that sunset was still 3 or 4 hours away. The bats would not be flying forth in search of their evening meal for quite some time. Liz emitted a frustrated sigh. In theory, the bat's nightly departure might have pointed her towards a way out of the confusing maze of caverns. Was it possible she could stay put here until dusk, she speculated, or would Morton catch up with her before then? Tired of carrying the awkward briefcase around with her everywhere, and remembering how it had almost slowed her down fatally back at the juncture between the two corridors, she looked around for something she could use to break open the lock. A slender stalagmite, about the size of a model rocket, attracted her eye, and she grabbed onto the tip of the tapering calcite formation with both hands, trying to break off the top. Might make a decent weapon, too, she thought, admiring its jagged point. As before, actually doing something, taking positive action, helped to keep her post-traumatic fears at bay. Her desperate struggle to survive was proving excellent therapy, if nothing else. Go figure, she mused, wondering what Alex would make of that. The twisting stalagmite was denser than the inverted icicle it resembled, but she eventually succeeded in snapping off the top 6 inches or so. She dropped to her knees next to the briefcase and pounded a shiny bronze clasp with the wide end of her improvised hammer. Every noisy blow made her wince and look about her nervously, afraid that the clamor had alerted Morton to her whereabouts. But after about half a dozen savage strikes, the clasp broke apart and she yanked open the lid. Inside, the salvaged craft materials were just as she'd last seen them, back at room number 19. Grateful for their amazing property, she wadded up the mysterious silver foil into an easy-to-carry ball, which she placed in the pocket of her jeans, along with fragments of that strange tan plastic. Then she hid the looted attache case in a crevice in the wall, so that it would not inform Morton that she had passed this way. Fortunately, the case's stylish black leather appearance rendered it virtually invisible in the obsidian darkness of the cave. That's better, she thought, hefting the stalagmite tip like a dagger. It wasn't much compared to Morton's semi-automatic, but it was something. At this point, anything that made her feel less like a defenseless victim was this word.
Incalculable
value. I'm moving on. And now the question was, stay where she was or keep moving. Listening again for Morton's menacing voice or footsteps, while keeping a close lookout for even a flicker of light from his flashlight, she thought she heard a slow, steady dripping coming from the far end of the grotto. She licked her dry, dehydrated lips, suddenly realizing just how thirsty and hungry she was. Stepping cautiously between the scattered stalagmites, taking care not to hurry beyond the radiance of the silver handprint. She made her way across the chamber until the eerie glow was reflected by drops of clear water, falling beat by beat from some unseen stalactite high overhead. The muddy floor, coated with wet bat dung, got more and more slippery as she neared the dribbling water. Cupping her hand, she caught the falling droplets and lifted them to her lips. The captured liquid had a funny taste, like mineral water, but was refreshing nevertheless. In time, she realized, thinking like the scientist she wanted to be, the calcium in the water would gradually build a new stalagmite or column right where she was standing now. Liz hoped to be long gone before then. Distracted by her successful quest for water, she was caught by surprise when a harsh white spotlight illuminated her from behind, throwing her distorted shadow onto the floor of the cavern. She spun around in a panic, almost slipping on the slimy rock beneath her feet, to see Joe Morton standing in an open archway, not far from where she first entered the Batcave. His flashlight shone in her face, forcing her to shield her eyes with her hand. Morton himself was visible only as a looming black presence behind the blinding glare. "Don't move a muscle, freak," he growled, then chuckled cruelly. "Bet you thought I'd given up." "Not really," Liz thought, searching futilely for some way out. She felt exposed and vulnerable, like an escaping convict caught by the watchful eye of a prison searchlight. Many feet above her, the bats, perhaps disturbed by Morton's bright light or bellowing voice, rustled and screeched unhappily. Inspiration struck, and the imperiled teenager hurled the pointy stalagmite tip at the ceiling, while simultaneously throwing herself onto the slimy floor. Not surprisingly, Morton fired his pistol, the explosion sounding like the Big Bang itself in the vaulted underground chamber. Face down in the muck, Liz couldn't tell whether it was her calcite missile or the answering gunshot that most upset the bats, but the net result was the same. Hundreds of Mexican free-tailed bats abandoned their roosts and began flapping madly for the quickest route out of the grotto, which just happened to be the wide open archway where Morton was standing. The gunman screamed in fear and agony, his horrified cry almost lost amid a chorus of high-pitched squeaks and the frantic flapping of hundreds of leathery wings. The beam from his flashlight zigzagged wildly over the uncaring walls of the cavern as he fled hopelessly the unstoppable deluge of bats. Liz scrambled to her feet and dashed in the opposite direction. The ground sloped steeply ahead of her, and she ran downhill, following a trickle of water that she prayed led to another exit. The deafening sound of the bat's mass exodus had only just begun to lessen in volume when she gradually spotted a gap in the wall ahead. She plunged into the shadowy void, even knowing that her downward trajectory was only taking her farther away from the surface, away from the sun. Behind her, Morton howled in pain and fury. "I'll kill you, you witch! I'll shoot you full of lead!" It won't be the first time, Liz thought. Chapter 26.
Following the directions Isabel had lifted from Lieutenant Ramirez's mind only seconds before his death, Max and his comrades soon found Ramirez's car, a snazzy metallic purple Porsche, parked alongside an isolated dirt road in the foothills of the Guadalupe Mountains, less than 5 miles from where the yellow crime scene tape fixed in the area surrounding Morton's abandoned blue Chevy. One sentence. Driving just below the speed limit as to not invite the attention of the police, the Jetta and the Jeep had hurried past the site of Okada's murder, resisting any temptation to rubberneck. Now Max hit the brakes next to Ramirez's Porsche, then jumped out of the driver's seat onto the rocky ground. "Is this it?" he asked Isabel fervidly. "Is this the place?" His sister looked around, peering over the top of her mirrored sunglasses. "Yes," she confirmed promptly. Climbing down from the Jeep, she pointed towards a craggy ridge about 1.5 miles away. "That's where he went. The cave is up there." That was all he needed to hear. Without waiting for Michael and the rest, currently parking the Jetta behind the Porsche, Max sprinted across the arid soil into the hills. The more he ran, dodging cacti, boulders, and ditches, the less need he felt for any directions at all. He could sense Liz's presence and her danger. "Hang on, Liz," he whispered, his pounding legs propelling him up a steep mountain trail, while the blazing sun beat down on him, causing the rugged, reddish-brown landscape to ripple before his eyes like a mirage. "I'm coming." "Max, wait," Isabel shouted behind him, her voice already sounding faint and distant. He heard the others chasing after him, with not only his worried sister yelling at him to let them catch up. "Wait up, Max," Michael called. "Don't do this alone." But Max couldn't stop. He couldn't even slow down. He had hesitated before back in Morton's hotel room, and Liz was now paying the price. I can't fail her again, he thought, stricken with remorse. The closer he got to the ridge, the more he could feel Liz's fear and despair calling out to him via the special bond they shared. Time was running out, he understood, and Liz needed his help. He had to get there in time. He knew that Michael was worried about him facing Morton alone, afraid that he might do something he would regret later, but Max no longer feared losing control. His overpowering post-traumatic hatred of the homicidal gunman had been superseded by an even more compelling emotion, concern for Liz's safety. He had his priorities straight at last, and protecting Liz took precedence over any burning desire for revenge. If he had to kill Morton to save Liz, then that's what he would do. But with a cool head, his actions determined by the circumstances, not by stormy emotions beyond his control. This is about Liz now, he affirmed. That's all that matters. His legs were aching by the time he crested the ridge where he found the cave entrance, just as Isabel had described it, an open mouth with an inhospitable hillside, partially concealed by an overhanging shelf of rock. He could see why it appealed to Morton as a hideaway. Thank goodness Isabel had inside sources of information. He was about to enter the cave when a thunderous rumbling, surging from up deep within the earth, warned him to leap to one side, only seconds before an explosion of bats erupted from the mouth of the cavern, flapping madly into the daylight. Confused and disoriented, hundreds of bats spiraled upward like a leathery tornado before winging into the hills in search of safer roosts elsewhere. Max blinked in confusion. He had no idea what would cause the bats to abandon the cave in droves hours before sunset, but he knew it had something to do with Morton and Liz. This can't be good, he thought, wondering briefly whether Michael and the rest had seen the swirling cloud of bats as well. Perhaps one of them would know what this meant. Ducking his head to avoid smacking it on top of the gate, he rushed into the cave. Psychic energy crackled around his fingertips, ready to attack or defend, but all he saw right away was Ramirez's lifeless body laying at the center of a pool of congealed blood. Glazed brown eyes, now forever beyond fear of blackmail and extortion, stared blindly at the ceiling, while a disguised wire hanger and a torn silver shower cap, both completely worthless, rested on the cavern floor, only inches away. Max wasted little time contemplating the lieutenant's corpse, instead searching the dimly lit cave for clues as to the whereabouts of Liz and her abductor. He had no flashlight, but he didn't need one. With a moment's concentration, a silvery halo radiated from his hand, lighting up the area around him. His eyes swiftly spotted footprints in the dust leading further into the cave. The smaller prints he recognized as Liz's, while a series of larger boot prints indicated that Morton had gone deeper into the cavern as well. Liz! No, he said, Liz! He called into the shadowy throat of the cave. It's Max! Can you hear me? Liz! Liz! No one answered, leading him to wonder how far Liz and Morton had descended into the unexplored depths ahead. She's down there somewhere, he knew, convinced by both the footprints and his own undeniable sense that the girl he loved was nearby. He didn't know why the kidnapper and his victim had chosen to disappear into the lower regions of the cave, but he knew without hesitation that he had to follow them. Max, where are you? Wait! Michael's voice invaded the primitive confines of Morton's hideout. Max heard his best friend, who had obviously taken the lead among the others, scramble up the gravelly ridge outside. Hang on, Max. Wait for me. I'm right behind you. Sorry, Michael, Max thought. No time. Liz needs me now. Like an alien Orpheus braving the underworld in search of Eurydice, he charged into the waiting darkness, using his gleaming hand as a torch to light the way. I'm coming, Liz. I'm coming. Okay.
And now we gotta save because just in case it boots us. Plus, I don't think we want to reread 2 chapters again. So
no, join us. We'll be right back.
Yeah. Now we're getting
BRB.
to where we basically were before. Before
yes,
we got booted. So,
BRB.
All right, you guys, we will be back in like
and scene. Rachel said.
And soon. All right, we'll be back shortly.